we're going to dive right in. So we're going to kind of forego the formalities, because at this point you've all been in a virtual environment, so you know to kind of mute yourself, kind of cut down on background noise, you know how to raise your hand, those kind of things. So we're just going to kind of jump right in. I am going to tell you though, if anybody has ever been in one of my classes, I hate death by PowerPoint. So I've got a couple of questions I'm going to throw out at you. So if you have your chat box open and ready, because I'm going to have a couple of questions I'm going to ask you to put into the chat box. And so one of the first things I want to know from you, when it comes to resumes, if you had to pick one thing that you struggle with the most, give me just a real quick, 1 word, 2 word, short phrase, put it in the chat. What are some of the things that you struggle with when it comes to resumes? I'll give you just a couple of seconds to kind of get your creative juices flowing there.
Michelle, I can share those as they come in.
Okay. So don't know how to put it up at all. All right, good. I'm sorry, Jody, go ahead.
Oh no, Taylor said I just really don't know how to set it up at all. So formatting, it sounds like.
Okay, good. What else?
Adding personality.
Oh, good one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, keep popping your answers in there. And for the sake of time, here they come.
Not having enough to show off, what to include. Since I'm only a freshman, I don't really have a lot to put on there. People say not to make it look like too much, but they also say not to make it look too unique. I would say more along the lines of deciding what to include and what not to.
Okay. I think we're going to touch on all of those things. Like I said, we may not go into a deep dive on any one of those, but Jody and myself, as well as our whole team, I'll share at the end here how you connect with any one of us. We can certainly sit down and do a one-on-one and kind of get into this on a deeper level. So when we think about what do you put on your resume as far as what attributes that employers are looking for, sometimes this can be a little bit of a challenge. And I'm going to tell you, regardless of the type of the job that you're applying for, whether it's an internship, a summer job, your first what you would call grown-up job, or even some of those things you do in a volunteer role that I can call them, or I would call them skill building opportunities. There are certain skills or competencies, if you can think of them that way, that all employers want to see across the board. Doesn't matter if you're going into business or communications or accounting. I mean, there's certain things that everybody wants to see. In the career world, we call these core competencies. And so as you can see on your screen, these are things like critical thinking, leadership, teamwork. Regardless of the specific career path, these are pieces that your resume hopefully will help you demonstrate that you have some of these skills. Employers don't want to have to sit down and teach you, how do you communicate with people? How do you work together? They don't want to have a conversation with you about professionalism in the workplace. They want you to already have those things or be working on those things. And so when you talk about, I'm only a freshman, I don't know what to put on my resume, we can go back and talk about those other experiences that you've had. You might think this has nothing to do with my preferred career path and say journalism. We can almost argue that there are certain elements you learn when you're flipping burgers at McDonald's or whatever that really kind of speak to some of these things that you have. And so that's kind of the challenge sometimes. How do you demonstrate those things on your resume? So one of the first things that, if you haven't heard this before about a resume, this will be your first time, and it certainly won't be your last time. You need to tailor your resume to the job that you're looking for. And if you think about what employers are looking at, so they've got hundreds of applications and resumes coming across their desk. And while you're a wonderful person, you've got all this rich history, from the employer's perspective, they don't want to know your entire life history. That may sound a little bit crass, but they want to know if you have the experiences and the education that they are looking for. It's going to help you do the job that they have to fill. So how you do this, first of all, look at the job description that you're applying for. And you may say, gosh, I'm a freshman, I'm not going to be applying for anything for a couple years or maybe even longer. Find that job description now. I don't care if it's in Alaska or if it's in Florida, wherever it is. Find that job description and use that as a place to start to build from. And we can share places, like ONET, Occupational Handbook, Job Hero, and we can maybe pop those into the chat here along this morning. You can just Google, journalism job description, and you're going to have something to work with, and that's going to help you identify some of those critical skills that are going to be necessary to do that job. And then it's going to help you kind of look at some of the experiences that you have and how they may be related to the position that you're looking for. When you're going through your resume, you want to make sure that you pay close attention, excuse me, to the different action words and things that are used in the job description. This is going to give you a little bit more of a clearer picture of what is expected of you. Something else that you hear us say a lot is make sure that you're using keywords. And what I mean by keywords are things that are specific to the job, things that are specific to the industry, and things that are potentially specific to the company. And there's a couple different ways to figure out what those are. So anybody that knows me knows I tend to be a little bit old school. This whole virtual thing is really kind of thrown me for a loop. So if this was me, I would have my pencil paper copy of my resume and my job description. And I would go through the job description with the highlighter and highlight those words that are specific to that job. And we're not talking about things like and the, all those preposition words, take those out. Words like responsibility, skill, throw those out. Words that are specific to that particular job or opportunity. And then you want to look at your resume. And again, highlight those keywords. If you don't see some of those same keywords bubbling out of both documents, then something's missing. You need to go back to your resume and try to incorporate more of those keywords. And I'm not saying make things up. I'm saying sometimes you can choose a different word that means the same thing that you want to say, but that is now one of the keywords that they're using within their industry. Another way to see is, how your keywords measure up to that resume is to do a word cloud. And I'm going to go on the assumption that most of you know how to do a word cloud. You can just Google free word cloud. There's several different platforms out there. Cut and paste the job description. It's going to pull out those preposition words and then see what kind of word cloud pops out of that. And then again, do the same thing with your resume. You should see that your word clouds are similar. If they're not similar, then we need to kind of go back to your resume and rework that a little bit. Before we kind of jump into the different parts of a resume, I want you to put into the chat what you think the different sections that a resume should include. So when you kind of get a visual of what a resume should include, pop into the chat at least one section that you think should be on a resume.
Education, skill, work experience, another work experience. Oh, we have somebody raising their hand, Michelle, Madeline.
Okay, Madeline, you got a question?
It won't let me send anything in the chat for some reason, so I don't really know what to do.
Oh, well, if you want to raise your hand and unmute and just share, that will work too. I'm not sure why it's doing that.
Yeah, I don't know either. I was just going to say skills, so.
Okay, thank you. That's perfect. If anybody else is having that issue, you can also raise your hand, unmute. I know Michelle asked the whole questions, but in areas like this where she's asking for feedback, if you can't type that, that's perfect.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, like the executive summary, sometimes we call that an objective. And you guys, all of your answers are right. Contact info, references, we're going to talk about that. Actually, we won't talk about that, but I'm glad that you put that in the chat because I do want to touch on that a little bit later. So here are some of the things that I came up with as far as what you would find on a resume. Sometimes there's things that's called additional work experience. There are things, sometimes your community involvement, volunteer things that you've done. We've mentioned education, a heading, or that's where your contact info. Sometimes there's an honors or awards section, leadership, an objective, and some relevant experience. And so those are just kind of some of the things that you would normally find on a resume. And we're going to talk about some are required and some are optional. But that kind of gives you an idea. So when we think about how resumes are put together, they are put together so that the most important information goes top, the second most important information goes next, and so on and so forth. So with that in mind, the very first thing that should be on your resume is your header. And there's a few guidelines I want to share when you want to keep in mind when creating your heading. First of all, and this sounds really bizarre, put your name on there. Put your full name. It's a personal choice. If you want to put a middle initial, you don't have to, but that's just kind of a personal call. A lot of times people will put that in bold font. Maybe it's a couple points bigger than the rest of your font, so maybe like a 13 or 14 point font. You want to make sure that you include your complete address. Some students, especially college students, will put their campus address and their home address. It's a personal preference. I've seen it done with 2 addresses. I've seen it done with 1. If you choose to use 2, just make sure that somehow you are indicating which one's your campus address, which one's your permanent address, so that employers know, depending on the time of year, how to get a hold of you. Phone number, I can't tell you how many resumes I've seen that they got the phone number, but there's no area, so don't forget the area code. Email address. We encourage you to use your Kent State email. Even after you graduate, you have access to that email. It connects you to the university. It's a very professional looking email. If for whatever reason you don't use your Kent State email, and I'm totally okay with that, but I'm not okay with an email like twinmom225. That's my email, by the way. It's not professional sounding. It has no bearing on me in the workplace. Yes, I have twins, but that doesn't matter. So you need a professional sounding email. Michelle Adkins at yahoo.com, or if there's another Michelle Adkins, put a number sequence or something, but something that's a professional sounding email. LinkedIn. Quite often we'll find LinkedIn addresses on your resumes. I think that is fabulous. My only suggestion, or not really suggestion, but tip rather, is if you're going to put your LinkedIn address up there, make sure you go to your LinkedIn URL and customize your URL. And if you don't know how to do that, Jody and I can walk you through that later, but that just makes it easier for people to find you, because your normal LinkedIn URL is a combination of letters and numbers, and it's going to have no bearing on that employer trying to remember who you are when they're looking for you in LinkedIn. And if you don't think they're not looking for you in LinkedIn, you're wrong. They're looking for you. Just make it easier by putting it on your resume. So as you can see here, just a couple examples of what a heading could look like. You see in one example, the student used the same font and just kind of popped their name up a little bit bigger and in bold. The other one, they actually chose a completely different kind of font. They put, both addresses. It's got permanent, current, and they've got their email address, and they've got their LinkedIn. So just a couple of examples of what a heading could look like. So before we move on to the next section of a resume, I want you to put into the chat what you think the next section of a resume should be after the heading. Oh, Carly, I just saw your question. Do you recommend creating an account on LinkedIn? Yes, I do.
I also added education, and then we have some other objective or skills.
Short sentence about yourself. All right, good. So here's the thing. The next section, if you were to choose to do an objective, or I think earlier somebody called it like an executive summary, that's also been referred to as like a personal statement, professional statement, that's an optional section on a resume. If you choose to use one, then yes, it would go right after your heading. If you do not choose to use an objective, the next sentence would be your experience. Or, I'm sorry, I completely messed it up. Your education, rather, would be your next section. So let's kind of jump into what would be on your education section, how you lay that out. So first of all, obviously list your degree. But do not abbreviate. Do not put BS, do not put BA, do not put BBA, all the different degrees that are out there. Make sure you spell it out. Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Business Administration. And then the next thing that you want to include is your graduation date, the month and the year. Don't really put fall or spring. I prefer, August or May, December. And you don't really need the word anticipated or upcoming or expected in front of that. When somebody gets your resume and they see that you're working on a BBA at Kansas University, you're majoring in marketing, and you're graduating May of 2022, they don't need that word expected to tell them that you are currently a student. So it's kind of redundant. So you really don't need something like that on there. You want to make sure that you put the name and the city of the university. You know, with something like Kent State University, it may seem redundant to put Kent, Ohio after that. You need to indicate the city and the state in which your institution is located. Put your major, and if you have a minor, include that. If you have a concentration, if you can include that. If you're involved in a certificate program, you would put that in there. And there's a couple different ways that you can create that. But those are certainly nuggets of information that you want to make sure that you have on your resume. Another thing that is, you don't have to put this on there, but if your GPA is a 3.0 above, it can be argued that it's beneficial to put that on a resume. If it's under 3.0 and above, folks would probably tell you it's probably not beneficial to put it on there. I've seen students have both their cumulative GPA and their major GPA. That's a personal preference. If you want to put both of them on there, just make sure that you signify somehow which is which so that the employer knows what that is. A few other things that you might want to put before we go to there, you might want to put on a resume. I've seen some students who would put in this section called significant coursework. So this would be where you would include, you know, maybe up to 6 courses that you really want to highlight, especially if you're in a program that can go, like biology, for example. Biology can go a lot of different ways as far as, you know, occupational and career paths. So depending on what you're doing, you might want to specify a couple specific courses that you've taken to really kind of help the employer see the different kind of components of that program that you've taken and how they can apply or they relate rather to the job that you're looking at. So as you can see here, this is just an example of what an education section could look like. And you see there, they spelled out Bachelor of Science, and then they put, you know, the university underneath with the city and state. And then they put their major, which was biological science with a pre-dentistry concentration, and their minor was in chemistry. Again, you don't have, it doesn't visually have to look like this. There's a lot of different ways that you can put that in from a creative perspective, but this is just kind of gives you a visual of what that section could look like. So the next thing on your resume, earlier you guys mentioned skills section, I think was one of the things that you suggested. That's another optional section. If you choose to do a skills section, it normally would go after education, but it's optional. So if we're looking at just those required components, after education would be your experience section of a resume. And this can be a little bit of a challenging section. So I want to talk about this a little bit. Earlier I mentioned, you know, sometimes resumes have what we call additional work experience section. And so when it comes to experience, you can almost kind of categorize your stuff into 2 different camps. Either yes, it's relevant to what you're looking to do in the future, or no, it's not relevant, but it's still important. And we all have those kind of experiences in our background. So when you think about relevant experiences, those are just that. Things that you've done, jobs you've had, volunteer roles even that you've completed, internships, anything that's related to the future job that you're going to be applying for. And don't automatically discount some of those jobs that you don't think are in your field. If you remember back to some of the critical competencies and core skills we talked about earlier, those really could be included under your relevant experiences section. Additional experience are things that, you know, you just don't think that there's any way that that is related to your future career path, and that's fine. It doesn't mean they were not important, but it does mean we don't need to take up valuable real estate on a resume, something like that. So we would include minimal details on those. And so I'm talking like the role that you had, the company that you were with, the city that it was in, the dates, and that's it. Doesn't really need to take up more than 1, maybe 2 lines on a resume. So we kind of circle back to what do you include for relevant experiences? You want to make sure that you are including, you know, the basics, the role that you had, the company that you were with, the city that you were in, and the dates that you had. And you want to write what we call accomplishment statements or impact statements. And these are more than just what you did during that job. These are things that are written in a way that allows you to highlight some of those skills that you used in that job that are going to be beneficial for the future positions that you're looking for. And these can be kind of complicated to write, but I'm going to give you kind of a little 3-part formula, if you will, on how to write these things. And we've got resources on our website. I'm going to drop the link in the chat here later, and so you can go there. If you think about what you did, like what was a specific task that you performed, but then take it one step further, how did you do that? What skill did you use? What method did you use? Was there a software program that you used? That's when we're starting to get into that skill that you used. And then the last one, which really kind of pushes us out of our comfort zone sometimes, is the why did you do that? And thinking about when employers are reading your documents, they kind of have this little question in the back of their head, and it's going, so what? You want to answer that so what question before they can even ask it. So when you kind of write, why was this particular thing important? It helps you show impact. Our career advisors will push you to kind of get that why. Include numbers and quantify things when you can. That helps to show depth and impact and detail of what you did. Go to that job description. Use that as a recipe, if you will, for the type of things that you need to include in your resume. What you include in a resume for job number 1 may be different than what you include for job number 2 because you're speaking to the job description. To give you an idea, here's just a visual. You can see that the one on top was a dental receptionist, and so they wrote 3 pretty strong statements that really outlined what they did. It helped them to identify the skills that they used, and they really kind of worked to kind of quantify and really explain the why in that. And then you see underneath, they felt that their role at Burger King really didn't lend any value, so they really there's no point in taking up some real estate on that resume by putting those bulleted statements down there. But they worked that job for a year and a half, so it was really important for them to show that they were working that period of time. And here's another example. You can see this person, another internship, just laid it out a little bit differently. Still has a lot of that same information and how they really are able to talk about what they did in that position and how that's going to benefit them in the position that they're doing in the future. So the 3 pieces that we kind of went over already are what I would call required: your heading, your education, and your experience. Beyond that, the rest of the things on your resume, while they certainly add value, they're not necessarily considered required. So some of those things would be the objective. If you're going to have an objective, it should be very specific to that particular job. It shouldn't be something generic that says seeking summer internship. As an employer, that doesn't tell me anything. If you're going to put an objective, you need to tell me who you are, what are you looking for, and when. So you want to use the job title in the position that you're looking for. Motivated individual seeking sustainability internship for summer 2021 with First Energy. That's very clear as to what that person is looking for. A skills section, if you're going to include a skills section, think not only about those technical skills that are going to be beneficial to that job, some of those critical skills we talked about, but also some of those, and for as much as I hate the word soft skills, but some of those core competencies, those communication, problem solving, those types of things. I mentioned additional experience, honors and awards. That could be everything, from clubs that you were in. It could be the dean's list. It could be, maybe you got some sort of an employability or productivity award at work. Those types of things can be on there. Again, listing student clubs, extracurriculars that you're in. And don't just list them. Put a bullet or 2 to really kind of let them know, what did you do? Don't just put, I was a member of the biology club. What did you do? Were you a committee chair? Did you, spearhead a particular project? Were you a co-chair for something? Did you hold an office? And then put that volunteer experience on there. And I put it depends on the specifics, because if you do a volunteer job or a role and it's directly tied to your career field, I would argue that could almost go under your relevant experience. So if you're going to go into, say, marketing, and you led the Bible school class at Sunday school, that would probably go under volunteer experience, probably would not fall under your relevant experience. If as a student, you've had the chance to go to workshops, if you've had a chance to work with some of your professors, to go to different conferences and things, then you might want to have what we call a professional development section on your resume. So I know we're at 1:30 and we're diving into cover letters. And I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because I know we got a late start and I know some of us have obligations at 2 o'clock. So I'm going to jump into this, and then when we get finished, I know I will hang out as long as I need to for any kind of questions. And so not hearing any little bing bongs in the chat, then I'm going to go ahead and kind of keep going. But I do want to know, from a cover letter writing perspective, how comfortable are you? Are you really comfortable? Are you scared to death? Are you kind of in between? Where would you lie in your comfort scale when it comes to writing a cover letter?
Not comfortable. Never made one. In between.
Okay.
Never made one either. Oh, wait, one person said I've written like 10. And another person said, yeah, no idea.
Okay. Well, I don't know how Jody's opinion is. My opinion is cover letters are way harder to write than a resume. So what I want to do today is just kind of break down the overall sections of a resume. Again, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of resumes. That's where any one of us are more than happy to sit down with you on a personal level and walk through that with you. We can do cover letter critiques and all those kinds of things. But when we think about the basics of cover letters, so, you know, cover letters allow you to be a little bit more personable. They really allow you to kind of demonstrate a little bit more to that employer who you are. It allows you to kind of help them understand what makes you unique, what makes you you, like who you are. And it also allows you to demonstrate your writing skills. If you think of how a resume is put together, a resume is full of little nuggets of information. They're categorized in different ways on your resume. They're actually, if you're doing your resume correctly, there should not be a full grammatically correct sentence anywhere on that resume. It's phrases, it's chunks of words thrown in there. So it really is not a good example of your professional writing skills. And so your cover letter, you know, one of the objectives is to show them you do have professional writing skills, and not only just saying that you have it, but using this as a tool to demonstrate that. And cover letters are tailored even more to that particular organization than a resume is. We talked about resumes are tailored to the job. Cover letters are like tailored supreme. You know, I mean, they are tailored even more to that particular organization. And you don't want to send a cover letter, one cover letter, to 5 different jobs, because they're going to know right off the bat it's a cookie cutter letter and it's probably going to get file 13 into the garbage. So you want to make sure that you customize it each and every time. So when we talk about kind of the layout of your cover letter, what it should look like, this is pretty much, you know, standard business writing format. Return address, as you can see, it's always going to be at the top. It's going to be flush left. And I say always, but I've also seen cover letters that use the same heading that you do in your resume. I'm okay with that. I think a lot of people are okay with that. It's a judgment call. To do standard business letter writing, if you know, you would put, if that's the method that you choose, after you would put your return address at the top. You know, typically you skip a line and you put the date. And unlike resumes, where resumes, you, regardless of the number, you don't spell it out. You put it in numerical form. And proper English, you know, used to teach you anything under than 10, you spell out the number. That does hold true on cover letters. You know, so you spell out the date when you're talking and things like that. You don't put, you know, 6/8/2020. You make sure that you spell out the date under there. And then you would continue then with your mailing address and your greeting. And so this sounds kind of silly. Make sure you have the accurate mailing address. But go to the website. Don't just work from the job description. Go to the actual website, that the company that got this position available. Understand what is their main address. Where is your letter going to be going? Especially if it's a company with multiple divisions and they have multiple physical locations. Make sure you have the actual accurate mailing address when you're creating this cover letter. and what department the cover letter is going to go to. Again, don't just rely on that job description, because sometimes those job descriptions are not clear enough with all the details that you're going to need. So go to the website. If it doesn't specify what department it is, try to figure it out. Go to the human resource portion of their website and try to figure out what the exact department is. Maybe there isn't a department. Maybe it's a super small company and everything goes to the lady at the front desk or the gentleman at the front desk. That's fine, but do your homework. This next element, this sometimes is a little bit challenging too. You don't always know who you're writing the letter to. The job description doesn't always say, send your resume to Michelle Atkins at, gives you the address. You have to do your homework. Again, go to that company's website, try to figure out who the director of the HR department is. And if you don't know, you know what? Pick up the phone. But when you pick up that phone, have a couple other questions ready, because you don't want to call and just say, hey, who do I make the letter out to? You could call and say, hello, my name's Michelle, and I'm really interested in the ABC position that I saw you posted. I have a couple specific questions. Might there be somebody there who I can speak with further? That's going to then allow you to get to that person that you need to speak with, also to ask any additional questions that you have. And sometimes they're going to tell you there is nobody, and then you can put, like a dear sir. And actually, I don't even like the dear sir and dear madam. I would recommend that you put something more like dear hiring manager, dear search committee chair. Put something, don't put like to whom it may concern. If you don't know the name of the person that you're applying for or applying to, put a title, some sort of a title that could get to a person. So again, HR manager, HR director, search committee chair, those kinds of things. As you can see here, here's another example of how you could put that together. If this person is a doctor, make sure that you're using their credentials correctly, and make sure, start it off with a proper salutation. Don't just put hello, something professional. Dear Dr. White is perfectly acceptable and actually advisable. So when we think about that first paragraph of your cover letter, you really want to be able to communicate to the employer, why are they reading your cover letter? And you want a first paragraph should be something that grabs their attention. And if you think about this employer, they're most likely reading through a lot of different cover letters. So your first paragraph should be something that's really informative, but that's also kind of catchy and kind of personal, because you want them to remember you. In this first paragraph, you want to be very clear, and you want to state the position that you're applying for. And you also want to tell them how you learned of this opportunity. That's actually going to be very helpful for them. You also want to include in this first paragraph your degree, whether you're still working on that degree or whether you've graduated, and what university you're with. And then in addition, tell them what's your field of study. And then in this first paragraph, you don't want it to get too huge. So you really have to select your words carefully. You want to put in this first paragraph, what are those top 3 to 4 skills that you have that bring to the table that help set you apart? And so a great tip before you even start this cover letter is to work through that job description and identify at least one experience or one skill that you have for each of the responsibilities that they have outlined in their job description. And then go back and select those experiences and those skills that you feel you are most aligned with. And then pick out those top 3 to 4 things on that list. That's what you want to talk about in your cover letter. So as we can see here on your screen, here's an example of an introductory cover letter that somebody wrote. And so a couple of things I want to pull out. You can see that they included the reason that their letter was written. They said, please accept this letter and enclosed resume application for, and they proceeded to list the position. They also included how they.
Hey, Michelle, I think my connection went out or yours. We lost you.
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yep, perfect. Just wanted to let you know.
Oh, that was weird. Okay. Okay, so then we kind of dive into the second paragraph. And this is where you're going to start to break down and share your experiences and strengths and your education and how those things are going to qualify you, or have qualified you rather, for the position. So highlighting your qualifications, your accomplishments, in your personality traits, and of those 3 to 4 things that you initially pulled out that you're most qualified for, talk about 1 or 2 of them in this first paragraph. Not all 4. Let's just start with 1 or 2. And don't just say that you have that skill or qualification. You want to be able to defend your case. I have this skill and here's why. So you go into detail about a particular experience or a particular thing that happened during your school or during your education. And so it's kind of that don't just tell them, or don't just show them, tell them kind of a thing. So you want to make sure that you elaborate with specific examples to back up the claim that you have the skill to do whatever claiming that you have to do. Give them experiences in your background that help them to understand how you have used that particular skill. So you can see here, this is a lot of words, and I really apologize for this, but you can kind of see here an example of the second paragraph. And this presentation is being recorded, so you can always come back and watch this later and a little slower if you need to. But some of the things that the student included in this paragraph was they really worked to connect their experiences in their sustainability internship to specifics, the data collection and the analysis skills that was really needed to do the job that they were looking to do. And they also worked to demonstrate they've got the strong writing and collaboration skills, which actually are a requirement for the position. And they also kind of used their experience within another position as a natural to communicate that. So they backed up their claims with definite experiences to really just kind of validate and verify that they do in fact have the particulars that they were talking about. Now, the third paragraph, really the third paragraph is just a continuation of the second paragraph. So what you want to do is just to continue sharing different experiences that you've had, continue connecting them to what the job requirements are and what the employer is looking for, and identify 1 or 2 more of those job qualifications, and talk about how your experiences and your education have prepared you to be successful in that role. And again, don't forget about those core competencies and critical skills that we talked about earlier. Remember things like communication, decision making, things of that nature. Cover letters, one of the points of a cover letter is to encourage the reader to respond to your resume. So you're picking out the top 3 or 4 things of your resume and talking about them on a cover letter. So when you start a paragraph like, as my resume demonstrates, that's going to encourage them to continue on to your resume to kind of see, like Paul Harvey says, here's the rest of the story. So using things like that are going to help them to refer to your resume. And then your third paragraph is also when you're going to get a little bit personable about why you chose Kent State, why you chose your major, and help you talk a little more maybe about a particular class project that you did, something that's going to help you from a student perspective kind of gain more experience, more qualities, talk about your coursework, things of that nature. And then the last thing that you want to make sure you include, whether in your third paragraph or it could actually be part of that second paragraph, is you really want to be able to show those employers that you've done your homework, you've researched them, you understand their company, by explaining to them why do you want to work for them. And that's more than why do I want to work as a journalism, in journalism, but why do you want to work for their particular company? You want to be specific about this. What is it about their company that attracted you? And hopefully throughout your research, something has spoken to you about this company. So don't use generic statements because they can see through those. Be honest, be genuine, and cite your research. Something like, well, I was reading on the Wall Street Journal the other day where your company just received, $150,000 grant for new medical equipment. and then continue to go into how that connects you to the company. So make sure that you tell them how you've learned of some of these informations. You can see here again just another example of another third paragraph. So as you can see, read through it, you can see they continue to highlight an experience that they had, where they kind of took initiative and they used leadership to create a recycling program, and then that tied back to that job requirement that they had of educating people about sustainability. And then you can kind of see where they started a sentence as my resume indicates, and that encouraged the reader to continue to the resume for more information. And then they also focused a little bit on their education, in addition to a couple volunteer roles that they had, and they kind of talked about how those roles prepared them to be successful in the position that they were applying for. So the closing paragraph. So we've told them who we are, why we're interested, we've elaborated on our skills and experiences, and we've kind of connected the dots, so to speak, and now it's time to wrap it all back up again. So this last paragraph is really going to where you want to repeat and reiterate your interest in the position, and that you want to talk about the position further. This is also where this is a conclusion paragraph, so you can go back and you can summarize some of your key points, things like your education, your experiences, your skills, some of that things, just kind of summarize it again for them. And this may sound a little bit weird, but you actually want to ask for the interview. And then tell them, when or if you're going to follow up. Now, here sometimes is a challenge, because sometimes the job description may specifically say, do not call. And if it says that, then you got to respect that and don't do it. But if it doesn't specifically say that, I would encourage you to call within a couple of days, email within a couple of days, depending on how you submitted the documents, just to make sure that everything arrived okay. And you want to specify that in this interview so they know that, a couple of days later, you're going to call, you're going to email, you're going to follow up. And this also really kind of helps you to show your assertiveness and your desire for that interview. And then the last thing you want to do is use professional closing, a salutation like sincerely to kind of close out the letter. Most letters these days are submitted electronically, and some presents a challenge when it comes to your signature. I do not like scripted font as a signature. I would encourage you to get a nice crisp white clean paper, get a nice black felt tip pen, ballpoint pen, sign your name, take a picture of it with your phone, and upload it as an image into the letter. That allows you to put that personal flair into that letter. That is truly your signature, and that shows that you took a little bit more time and effort to make it personal, and then that's going to show them just how far you're willing to go to put your whole self into your job. And so you can see here another example of a closing paragraph. A couple of things I want to pull out. You can see if you read that through and through, they repeated their qualifications. They actually asked for the interview. They explained how they would follow up and when they'd follow up. And here's the big one. They thanked the employer for their time. So many times you see these letters, and the simple act of saying thank you goes so far with so many different people. So please make sure that you include a thank you to them. And then finally, providing how you're going to be contacted. Make sure you put your phone number, your email, things of that nature in that last paragraph. And I'm not sure how well you can see that, but that just is more of a visual of what a typical cover letter could look like. So that is all I had to share, and I know we went way over our 30 minutes, and I apologize for that. We do have about 10 extra minutes for any kind of questions. I am available to stay after 2 o'clock. So if you do have some questions, we can stay after 2. But what questions do you have?